Okay. All night long? You hear that all night long? I did not hear that last night. Wow. Okay. So church was one of the few acting different ideas spiritually. I don't think that's anything new. I've been walking through Colossians with my core group, and they faced a lot of things spiritually there too. Politically, I asked Jeff the other day, I said, what's the political landscape of the area? And he's like, oh, it's pretty Republican here. And I was like, yeah, that's where it is at home too. We're on TV, on the news, or if I go into Springfield, which is 30 minutes away, to find some pretty differing opinions, right? And it's not so much that we can even like come together on something we agree on. We have to be in disagreement. Right and left can't agree on anything. We have to do it. But how do we communicate God's truth to others, particularly our neighbors, maybe family, next generation? This is a question my wife and I are asking as we have a family with two moms living across the street from our suburban or from our nice, quaint little town neighborhood. As I have a woman who's going through a separation with her husband next door, and I saw her the other night put down more alcohol than I've ever seen and then mow the yard. But she's so down, and how do I, these are the questions that I'm asking myself too. And I think it has to come back to, if we don't know what we believe, there's no way we can communicate it to others. Anything to defend, Jesus is doing that, but we at least have to be able to talk about it, to communicate it, right, to understand where we stand. So I think it comes down to Romans 12, 1 through 3. And I'll just start at 2. Not being conformed to this world, but being transformed by the renewing of our mind, right? So that you may prove that the will of God is that which is good and acceptable and perfect. For through grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think more highly of himself that he ought to think, but to think so that to have sound judgment as God has allotted to each measure of faith. To be transformed by the renewing of our minds. To be transformed by the renewing of our minds. We talk about Jesus coming into our hearts and transforming our hearts. That is a true thing. But if we're not transformed by the way we think, by the way we operate, then we're not growing in His grace and knowledge as well. Okay, so what does this look like? Tonight is foundational. I forget who was asking me. It was in the back. She was asking me, what is tonight? Do I need my Bible tonight? Well, maybe a little bit tonight, but tonight is the why more so than the what. Why do we need this? Where are we at culturally? Part of it is, and I was talking to Pastor about this today, is our identity. We live in a world today that identity is defined by so many different things. What are some things identity is defined by? Name, okay. What's that? Work, right? What I do, Hey, I'm Nate. What do you do? I'm higher education, this and that. That's right. What else? Culture. Even like ethnicity maybe, right? So I'm a white male, right? So that's what I'm known as because that's become important. My heritage is important, and maybe I'm originally from Germany, so I'm a German white male. I don't know if I am or not. Cajun, right? I mean, for some people that is extremely important, especially our Hispanic cultures, right? They hold on to that dearly. For me, it's been as prevalent, but for others, it really is. What else? Family. So last names, sometimes last names in certain communities hold higher weight than others. In our town, it's a Kemp or a Roten. If you're a Kemp or a Roten, which are my friends, you are really well respected and you're really well known. If you get pulled over and you're a Kemp or a Roten, you're probably not going to get in trouble. That's just the way it is in our town. If you get pulled over and you're a Pinland, maybe not as much anymore. I got pulled over a few years ago and they're like, oh, it's you. See you later. So that's because I was talking on the phone and I swerved on the line a couple times. They're like, oh, you're not drinking. Glad that's my reputation. What else? What else are we known for? Political views. I'm a Republican. You're a Democrat. I'm not saying you're a Democrat. I'm saying that as an example. Right? And so that's, we're trying to find something bigger than ourselves to identify with. Sexuality, right? That's a huge one right now. We had even 8-10 years ago, we had a group come to our campus that was advocating for rights for transgenderism and homosexuals and others to be on our campus and not feel oppressed. And I don't want to be insensitive to that, but I don't feel like they've been oppressed. So we are struggling with, in culture, with what we find identity, and Pastor and I were talking about this today, that identity, if we're trying to find it in something bigger than ourselves, which we all are, if we don't find it in Christ, we're never going to find it, right? The argument isn't whether or not homosexuality is wrong. The argument is where we're finding our identity, and we got to change the way we talk about that question. One way that we've figured out identity is even moving into adulthood. Now, we've got a wide range, so I'm going to start down here because their idea of adulthood might be different than as we move back, okay? So, Kaylin, right? When do you feel like you will become an adult? No wrong answers here. There's not, 21, why? 21 because maybe because of the drinking age, maybe. That's a natural thing. What else? 21, you think that you should kind of be out of the house graduating college? Okay, Aubrey, what do you think? What age? 19? Oh, wow. You got some people who are ready to grow up down here. This is good news. Why 19? Just a good number? It's the last year of being a teenager? No? What do you think? 50 is when you become an adult. Okay. That's good news. I'm still reaching that age. All right, let's move back here. When do we become an adult? What do you think? So you haven't made it yet. Perfect. Anybody else? It doesn't have to be age. It can be even a life experience. I know I gave them different rules. It's because they need it. What's that?
I think I became an adult when I lost my parents.
Okay. When no one else was there to take care of me? Good. Okay. Man, that means I'm still a kid. This is good news. Some people will say when I hold my first job, right? When I'm financially independent, which is interesting now because many of you have kids probably that are adults. At what age can they hop off your insurance now? Is it 25 or is it 27? What's that? It's 27. I've heard 27 as well. So, which is crazy, right? Like, is that adulthood? Maybe, right? So, some people would say, my Korean friends in seminary would say that I was not an adult until I had a family, which I thought was a little ludicrous too because, I was 24, 25 years old, didn't have any kids, but I felt like I was an adult, maybe, except for my dad still paid for my car insurance and my cell phone bill. So I don't think I really was. So that's another one. Anything else that you can think of as an adulthood?
Financially stable when you hold a job for at least 6 months.
At least 6 months. Why 6 months?
Because you're past the probationary 90 days.
Oh, because you can't just get let go. Yeah, good. Good. Yes. Yes. Isn't it funny how becoming an adult has changed? Now, 40, 50 years ago, adulthood was much different, right? Maybe 18, right? Because we could get drafted, right? You had to grow up pretty quick at 18. Even before that, it might have been 14, 15, 13, right? Because school ended in what grade? 8th grade. You guys didn't know this?
I am so mad.
You guys got to learn your history, right?
Maybe teach us Christopher Columbus instead.
So my grandmother went to 8th grade education, wished she could always go more, right? Like she didn't get that chance. She had to come back, work on the farm. She had to cook some meals for the farm hands, and she had to get outside and do the extra work that wasn't getting done. She said, I always wish I could go to school like you did, Nate. I always wish I could go to school. So this is all about identity development too, right? Because identity development has changed. It's become more individualistic. It used to be even more communal. I would work, we would get married at a certain time, and now marriage is always, all over the place. It used to be that marriage was 18, 19. I think my dad's parents got married at like 19 and 20. My grandma waited till she was like 28, and she thought that she was old at the time. But now 28 is young, right? Because of even societal differences, cultural changes. We've changed the fact of what we accept. It was taboo to live with your significant other 40, 50 years ago, right? It was not accepted. Now it's like, why not? Cohabitation, what's the big deal? It's not a problem. There's nothing against it, right? We don't have any, you can't show me in Scripture where that's wrong. Well, we can, but you won't agree with us, and that's another issue. And so identity development has become this, it's different. Instead of focusing on these set of standards or this societal standard that we had for so long, it's now become internal, which has affected our spiritual development, which has affected our idea of what we believe and how our society sees those things. So all these things are interconnected. And you all, as your generation, and they would agree, probably has it more difficult than they did in facing these things. Even more important to know the truth and to be able to stand on it. So identity has become eternalized. That's internalized. Moving beyond borrowed values. We're not just taking societal norms anymore and saying that male and female relationships are the norm and therefore we have to maintain it. I can do what I want, right? It's self-authoritative in convictions, right? Morality is defined by either how I feel, the consequence, or the consequence that I get, right? So if it's based upon how I feel, then if this doesn't make me feel good, then why do I need to bother with it? If I don't have any negative consequences, or the consequences that I feel good, then I want to maintain it. That's where identities become, right? It's also fluid, and this is more towards this generation than this generation, but I feel like there's some gaps here. This is when I go over with my college students a lot. This generation is constantly working to try to reinvent themselves. That's why there's so many social media platforms. You know they're doing this to you, right? Like, you don't control this stuff. Like, they're doing this to you all. So you have a multitude of media platforms. Who's on Facebook? You guys? Oh, thank you. I wish yeah. Okay. Who's on Instagram? Okay, a couple more. Who's on Twitter? Okay, we're getting less. Who uses YouTube? Okay, a few. That's a little bit different, right? We don't have to create necessarily a personal profile there. Snapchat. This group right here.
I used to have YouTube. I had to get rid of it.
Right. Okay, so each one of those plays a different role, and it's particularly for this generation, they play a different role. And for this generation, for our older group, they play more of a social role, right? I keep up with my grandkids, or I keep up with my kids, I keep up with my friends who are retired and moved away, and I want to maintain these things, right? So I have to call them all the time. But for this generation, it really has become part of their identity. And so there's things called finstas. We could get into that later. That's not important. But like, they get their creative side through YouTube. They can create their videos. They can get their poise side through Instagram. So they're gonna take 1 million pictures. I exaggerate 1 million. They're gonna take 100 pictures, pick their best one, and show only their best thing on Instagram, aren't you? Unless you have multiple accounts, and then you have fun accounts for friends and business account for the ones you want to show up. This is stuff that manage and they deal with all the time. They say no, but your friends do it. Kaylin's saying yes.
I struggle to make one account. I'm not going
Right.
to make another.
She has 3. And you can toggle through them. You can toggle through them super easily. It's just a double tap on the bottom of the screen. And then you have Snapchat, which is a silly version of this, which is, why is it silly? Because? No, but why is it okay to be silly on Snapchat, young people? Because it disappears. Which is not true, and they know that. Okay, so this is what identity development is now. Okay, so we talked about identity development, even what it looks like to become an adult. Now our identity development is happening on a daily basis, and they're trying to figure it out, even more so for this next generation, okay? So we have spiritual decline that is happening in younger generations and all the way through. I think COVID has been significant in that. I think it's individual because of lifestyle choices. We've talked a little bit about that with, man, we're going quick. We might have to move into next session and start moving on. Lifestyle choices of gender, of homosexuality, of things like that, individuals are able to compartmentalize their lives. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that work is work, right? We're defined by our work. And work is over here, and I have my work people, and I act a certain way during work. But I also have my family, and my family may be going to church or not. They may care about spiritual things, they may not. So I act a certain way over spiritual things. And then I have my church people, and when I come into my church thing, I put my church hat on. You guys have known these people, right? You've seen the business people always put their suits on Sunday morning. Why do they do it? Because so they can have business on Monday through Friday, right? Like, this has always been the case. This is the same thing this generation's doing, except they're doing it online, right? Or they're doing it with their friends. They have their sports friends, the ones that they play basketball with. They have their church friends who they go to camp with, and they have the spiritual, and they're shaking their head. They're like, how does this guy know me? How does this guy know me? It's because I work with you. Right. I'm reading your minds. That's right. And so we live in a world right now where everything else, particularly this right here, demands our 24/7 attention. And what doesn't demand our 24/7 attention? Our faith, right? Even though he asks it of us, it doesn't demand it. He never demands it. And so we easily compartmentalize these things, right? I put my faith in this box, I put this in this box, and when I want to pull that box out, I can. And we've mastered it. We've tried to, at least. We don't understand that faith is a lens that we need to look through all aspects of our life through, okay? We do that individually. Now, culturally, we face different things. Because of our culture, because of our society, we value our free society, that we can believe anything we want, that we can practice anything we want. I think that's very valuable, but it's also provided opportunities for diverse worldviews, which we're going to go into here in a minute. It's also provided this rejection of traditional available choices. We've talked about this. It's reflected in how we view sexuality. It's reflected in how we view education. This is a huge struggle for what I'm going through right now. A lot of these students don't necessarily see college as the only option, which is great. We have choices. But for my industry, that's really hard. And they don't even see in-person college as the only option. I can stay home and I can get a degree in my pajamas. Right? Okay, that sounds great. That sounds great. But from my perspective and working with students outside the classroom, I know everything they're missing. And many of you do too. Because college was what? The best years of our lives. Why was it? Because we didn't have a whole lot of responsibilities, and it was a lot of fun, right? Yeah, we were shaking our heads. I've got to live college the last 12 years of my life when I was 24 to 36, so I've got to redo it every year. And it's still fun, but it's a lot harder to keep up because the students always stay the same age, right? Every year, my youngest students are 18, and every year I get a year older. It's getting harder and harder. So, rejection, culturally, we're rejecting the cultural norms that we've always had and the emergence of tolerance. What is tolerance? Right? This idea, this is my phrase. What is it? You do you. Right? YOLO. Did you say that, Jeff? Right? What does YOLO mean? You only live once, right? You only live once, right? YOLO.
You're on your own.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. You're on your own.
That's when my mom's like, I'm not making y'all do it. Y'all just gonna make something up yourselves.
I learn something new every time. Yo-yo is the new one, guys. You can tell that. You're on your own. Tell that to your kids. Yo-yo. See how they respond. I've never heard that one. But YOLO, right? You only live once, meaning I'm going to try this because I might not get the opportunity to ever try it again. Or you do you, which is it may work for you, but it may not work for anyone else, which we're going to talk about that even more so in a spirituality context here in a minute. Okay, so there's lots of different worldviews that we can explore. These are not important. I mean, you can write them down. They are important. But I just want you to have an idea of what we're facing in a society. Okay, these are a lot of isms. Because you might meet people as you talk to people about your faith that say, I'm an atheist, right? That's not even on this list. But an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God at all. And actually, one of my apologists, C.S. Lewis, who I like to read, I love to read, says, I'd rather deal with an atheist than I would with almost any of these, because at least they have a consistent view. Because then you get into agnosticism, which is, I believe in God, but I don't know if he really cares. He's kind of indifferent, right? Okay? So then those are two main ones, but then there's like these little pockets of what else I believe. So one is nihilism. If you think of annihilation, what do you think of? Total destruction, nothingness, right? Like if I'm going to annihilate someone, which we use that term quite a bit, which I think is pretty harsh to say, I hope that team annihilates the other team, leaves them nothing, leaves them standing in the dust, which is pretty harsh term. Nihilism is that. There's no intrinsic value or purpose, no absolute knowledge, no absolute truth. It's kind of an atheistic existentialism. It's an atheistic viewpoint. No God, we only exist for the moment. This is like a Stephen Hawkins, right? Richard Dawkins, like these types of people who think, one of the quotes is, we're only a computer, and what happens to computers when they die? They get dumped in the trash. And so therefore, in nihilism, that's what they would think of us as too. We have no intrinsic value or purpose, and therefore, when we die, it doesn't matter. That's the eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow. It doesn't matter. That's that viewpoint, okay? Pantheism. Pantheism is a popular view today because it believes that God is in everything, that every act that you commit is a spiritual act. Okay, so if I'm going to talk on the phone, this is a spiritual act because everything is spiritual. If I'm going to get a drink of water, where's my water bottle? Super spiritual act right here, okay, because God's in this water, and it's a spiritual act, okay? God is in everything. This is really popular. Those were two extreme examples. This is really popular with those who want to explore their sexuality because they want the sexuality to be a spiritual, which it is in a traditional marriage. We can get into that later. That's fine. I'm not denying that. But they want it in their definition of what sexuality is. And so God is in all these things, and it's kind of this new age. We're redefining what spirituality is. The next one, panentheism, is not everything is divine, everything is a spiritual thing, but everything that exists within God. So God encompasses all these things. Pan is everything, in theism, God. So it's very close to pantheism. In fact, I think it kind of came off of there. It's one that I still need to explore a little bit further. Pantheism, we're going to explore Buddhism a little bit further and kind of how they view suffering here in a minute. But it's, you know that, don't you? No? Okay. But it's more prevalent. Secularism. Secularism is the belief that the public square, particularly politics and other things, God doesn't belong there. So we are a secular society, right? And there's some value in that because then you can't define what religion defines the public square, but it also provides some items some freedom for almost anything to come in, right? That's what we're struggling with. So in a free society, I'm not talking biblically here, I'm not talking from my biblical worldview, from my American Constitution hat, if I'm only a constitutionist, not a biblical worldview, marriage looks a lot different over here, right? Because I'm taking God out of the equation. If I'm a secularist, then I say that equality, there is a lot of legitimate arguments there. Now, when I start putting my faith hat on with my constitution, viewpoint, then that starts to change. So that argument is a really difficult argument because from an American standpoint, if I'm only American, you could see where they're coming from. Now, from my biblical worldview, I could say, well, it's not what I uphold. That's a hard place to be, especially in our society. Consumerism. What's consumerism? Yeah, that's right. It's the belief that stuff will satisfy us. It's actually a spiritual worldview. The more stuff I accumulate, the better. My wife, when I first met her, she wasn't my wife. She was a girl I really wanted to date. She had a sign in her closet that said, "The one who dies with the most shoes wins." Right? Right? The one who dies with the most shoes wins. That's consumerism, right? Because if I have the most shoes, then I will be fulfilled with those shoes. This is another element of our society, because the more I have, the more happy I'll be, right? The more money I make, the more happy I'll be, which is not necessarily true, even though sometimes I fall into this trap, because pretty easy, and it takes money to live. It's an expensive world out there. And then relativism. This is what we had just got done talking about. What's true for you is not necessarily true for me. You do you, okay? This only works when we allow the word of truth to move from a constant to a movable thing, okay? This totally takes away the fact that there's no absolute truth. It's only what we decide it is, and it's a really dangerous place to be. It's a really dangerous place to be, and that's where our society is. Okay, there's one more, and I think this is one of the most prevalent ones, especially in our generations from about 18 to 40. Now, older, I think it could be getting in there, but this is what I've seen in the younger ones. It's called therapeutic moralistic deism. Okay, it's a big phrase. Pastor, have you heard this one? Okay. Therapeutic moralistic deism, let's break this down. Therapy. What does therapy help us do? Get over issues, right? Right? But if something is therapeutic, it makes us feel better usually, right? If we have a bum knee and I go to physical therapy, I'm going to work it out, and eventually I'm hoping that knee is going to make me feel better. What? Did he? Well, I have lots of physical therapist friends, but I'm glad your dad did physical therapy. That's good for him. You know, if I go to mental therapy, I've got a mental block in my head, and I'm hoping that I'm trying to remove it so that I can feel better and that not be there, right? It's not, therapy is not a bad thing, but something becoming therapeutic could be if it's an addictive thing, right? Okay, so moralistic is moralism, right? So what we're doing is we're saying morals are now dependent on what makes us feel good, and then deism is a God. So my morals make me feel good, and that is my God. Okay? Therapeutic, moralistic deism. This is pretty prevalent. It's basically a melting pot of beliefs. And if you said, I believe in therapeutic, moralistic deism, and you said, me too, it wouldn't necessarily mean the same thing. You get to choose what it is. You take whatever you want from whatever worldview you want, and you put it together, and you just stir it up until you like it and it tastes good. And if it doesn't taste good one day, you get to change it the next. Does this sound dangerous? Right? It sounds really dangerous, doesn't it? So God is, like this screen says, is like our divine butler, right? Wait on me, do what I want, and bring me the things I want. And if you don't, then I'll go find a different one. No big deal. There's plenty out there to choose from. Okay? And so this is where that identity development, where faith is just an aspect of our lives, right? It's just like sports. It's like family. It's like friends. It's like, okay, faith is on Wednesday nights. At least it used to be. Now it's, who knows when it is. It's Sunday mornings, if we even give it that. You know, when I was growing up, Wednesday nights were at least held for church. And then practice became too important somehow. And then Sunday nights were too. And my church barely does anything on Sunday night, especially during the summer. You know, we've kind of come into that because it's become such a family time, because families have determined that sports and other things are so important throughout the week that we want to give families their time. Well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to bring Sunday night into it as well, right? It's not that families are going to make family time more important. It's that they're just going to bring it in. If you remember the story of the rich young ruler, right? Rich young ruler comes up to, I don't think he was a therapeutic, moralistic deist. Don't believe that. But the rich young ruler comes up to Jesus and says, hey, what does it take for me to follow you. And Jesus says, sell all you got, right? It's going to cost a lot, but it's going to provide a lot. On the opposite, this costs very little, and it provides very little. That's why you always have to change it, okay? It's also me-centered. Okay, not harping on you guys here, but there's a group of people behind you that think that your generation is super entitled, right? Would you agree with that? Maybe a little bit? No? Okay, good. There is a perception that you would be entitled. I'm going to give you a secret. They were entitled too. We're all entitled. We're all about me. But this is a me-centered approach, right? It's entitlement, and it's a lot of times it's entertainment-driven. What makes me feel good, right? I do something, I take it in because it makes me feel good. And where is it originating? I don't know. Society? Could it be originating from the church? I don't know if it's originating from the church, but as Pastor and I were talking about today, it may be originating from the fact that the church hasn't done a really great job at really making the gospel what it is. That we teach rules or traditions rather than truth and the gospel, right? Because teaching the Bible isn't always the same as teaching the gospel. So I have a friend. She's kind of a friend. She's an acquaintance. One of my best friends from high school roomed with her husband, and she went to SBU at the same time I did. She went to college with me, but we ran in different circles. But I've watched her from afar over the last several years. You know, social media allows you to do that. Keep up with people, but not really interact with them, right? That's the beauty of social media. And I wasn't real close with her anyway, so it wouldn't have been real appropriate for me to really engage in conversation as a married man. And so I didn't need to, but I just watched just to see where she's at. And her husband really dealt with depression a lot. And so much so that he actually took his own life last year, right before COVID really got started, or right in the midst of it. Really sad situation. But she has turned into a pantheist, and maybe even into this therapeutic moralistic deism, where it's, if you haven't heard it, she blames purity culture. You guys remember the True Love Waits movement and the purity rings and things like that? Well, for my generation, that was a big thing, right? Like, our parents told us the importance of abstinence, which it is really important, don't get me wrong, the importance of these things, but it's all rule-based, right? Don't have sex before you get married because it's bad. Don't have sex before you get married because it's bad. I was fortunate because I had a youth minister. I remember the lesson on a Wednesday night. I was probably 9th grade, because when we talk about sex in youth group, that's probably the one I remember, right, as a 9th grader. Make other jokes you want. But he talked about the healthiness of sex within marriage and what the purpose of it. He went, probably more detail than I should have known at 9th grade, but it gave me a different perspective, and it changed the way I viewed my purity, changed the way I viewed my desire to remain wholeness. I don't think my friend got that. She was told, no, don't do it. And what she sees now is that she missed out on all these experiences that she should have had as a high school kid, as a college kid, because she was told no. I look back at it and think, thank you, Lord, for protecting me from all these hurts and things, right? And it's the same viewpoint. We're looking at the same experiences that we had growing up in youth group, probably different churches, same college, same message, but a different way of looking at it, right? And so I believe for her, she was taught the Bible, but she was taught rules of what to follow, and now she's tired of it. And it's popular today. You've heard of people deconstructing their faith. Super popular today. Josh Harris, who wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye, deconstructing his faith. Caedmon's Call used to be a contemporary Christian music group. I think they still might do a few things, but Derek Webb was a singer-songwriter in Caedmon's Call, deconstructed his faith. Hillsong, there's a guy from Hillsong, wasn't it too recently, deconstructing their faith. Why? Because they haven't relied on the truth, and it's not become part of who they are, it's become a rule-following movement. It's a scary thing. So, let's see what's next here. We have to look at Christianity from a biblical worldview, not a rule-based worldview, okay? God tried actually to give us rules in Exodus, right? That's the first time he did that. He said, hey, if you do all these things, you'll be in good relationship with me. And how long did it take? A snap? They actually disobeyed him before they were even told the rules. Right? Like Moses came down and they've got this calf that his brother had fabricated. And like Moses had to smash the 10 Commandments and go up and get new ones. Right? He was so frustrated. That's how long it took us to realize that we couldn't follow the rules. Okay? But he still allowed us to try, right? So a biblical worldview looks at absolute moral truth and that it does exist. Okay? We have to believe that. We don't have to, you don't have to, but I believe it's important to. It's defined by Scripture. Nothing else. Nothing else can define it. Jesus Christ is the divine Son of God and lived a sinless life. I'm reading a book right now. It's by N.T. Wright, and N.T. Wright is a theologian who is pretty well respected. I'm reading a book called Simply Jesus, and it is fascinating to read what Jesus thought of his own ministry and own political viewpoints and how he saw his kingdom work being played out. But Jesus Christ, believing who he was, who he is important because it's not just a was, but an is, right? God is the all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe and still rules today. Alongside that, which we'll get into, the third member of the Trinity, the Spirit works within us and all of us, right? Salvation being a gift from God, which can't be earned. Satan is a real being that we have to be aware of, who's looking to thwart God's plan. Now, we know the end result, but it doesn't mean we don't have responsibilities today. That we have the responsibility to know our faith and to share it with others. And that the Bible is inerrant, right? And accurate in its teachings, right? Now, there's some hard things in scriptures. There's some really hard things. There's some genocidal type things in the Old Testament that we have to look at. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a plan. That doesn't mean that there's things going on there that God was doing. It doesn't mean that I understand it. But these are the things that we have to come back to. Okay. I'm a little early. I can go to the next one if we want to, but I might be a little ahead. But do you guys have any questions, any thoughts? Because I want to leave it open for discussion. We got about 15 minutes. Have you seen this? Has this been prevalent? Is this something that you're familiar with? No? Parts of it? Let me ask this question. What bothers you the most? Let's get that. Let's get some emotion in here, because then that brings some good discussion. Yeah, what bothers you the most about what you heard tonight?
Oh, that there's no absolute truth.
Right. But has there ever been? I mean, obviously we believe there is, but like, has society ever seen that? Has there been a society that's ever seen that? That's what I meant by that question. Right? The more I study into to first century cultures when Scripture was written, the more I'm realizing we're not facing new things. Right? And it's so funny because I hear my parents saying things like this to me, which I know they're like really caring for me, but it's kind of one of those backhanded statements of like, oh, I know you have it so hard raising your kids. I'm so glad we didn't have to raise you kids like that. That's what it is. I'm so glad we didn't have to raise you kids like that. Like we're saying, like, what do you mean by this? Like, I don't know what that means, but you know, we had our own things, right? I think one of the toughest things right now in our culture is how readily available information is. So when I was growing up, Mom let me ride my bike all over the neighborhood. Okay? No big deal, right? We knew all our neighbors. We thought we knew all our neighbors. We probably didn't. But we knew all our neighbors. And now, I mean, I don't go outside, at least out front with my kids. My backyard's fenced in so they can go do what they want back there. But my kids don't go out front without me going out with them. Why? Because we hear about, I mean, I get an Amber Alert on my phone every time some kid is picked up that wasn't expected to, right?
That was one day, a month ago, and there was like two within like 20 minutes.
Right. Right, and that's created this fear inside me as a parent that said, well, and honestly, a month and a half ago, police were right across, you're going to think we live in a bad neighborhood. We live in a great neighborhood. Police are right across the street from our house because two girls were picked up by a red car. Now, I think they voluntarily got in, and mom didn't know where they went, but they were gone for a week or more. Right? We don't, and I don't know whatever came of it, but she kept putting on Facebook, if you hear my daughters, we're like, I mean, well, they don't even know. They don't even know what kind of car it was. I mean, that's why I don't let my kids out front, right? Out back, sure. That's why I'm anxious to get a home with like 3 acres and like, okay, go explore these acreage and then come back, right? I want a little bit of that upbringing that I had. But that's just one example, right? Politically, I mean, we look at any example, and we have so much information available today. No wonder mental health's going through the roof. I got more things to worry about. I hear of every major catastrophe, right? And if that's the case, and this is what we're going to get into next time, if that's what I'm hearing about, then most people are asking what question? If God's in the world, where is he? Why is there so much wrong happening today? If he's really in charge, why doesn't he do something about it? Why does he allow bad things happen to good people? Right? We mess things up pretty good though, don't we? Like us as humans. I actually wonder if how much the enemy, how much Satan has to do with it and how much we do ourselves. I feel like most of my detriment, now I think there's temptation there or whatever, but most of my detriment is self-inflicted, honestly, because I really don't need any help to be that bad. I actually do a really good job at it when I want to. When I don't want to, all the time. I'm actually really good at it, which I have to be reminded of every day, of why I need salvation, right? What else? Anything else bother you? Moral truth. Right. 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 And what's interesting is we have this mindset, not we, but society has this mindset, and I think we do too, that my actions don't impact anybody else. Right. 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 It's not hurting you. Why are you bothered by it? Right. Right. It's we don't understand the chain reaction, even if it is us that could happen, and that's that individualistic society, right? I live in my own lane. You can live in a lane beside me if you'd like. That's fine, but I'm going to choose what I choose to do, and it doesn't hurt you. So what does it matter, right? I don't know if anyone would become an adult, right? Because I still miss that a lot of times. And I still get, I think it's selfishness, honestly, right? Which is what we're going to talk about in the next session of like one of the most hated things, I think, that we see in other people, but we don't recognize in ourselves, right? I hate that other people are selfish, but that's selfish of me of saying that. So, yeah, that individual nature. Part of that too is we've encouraged that, right? Think about even our churches. In the Eastern world, this is something that's fascinating when I go to the Middle East and Israel. In the Eastern world, what is faith? Faith is what? Instead of individualistic, it's communal, right? It's actually familial based. That's what? It's tribal. Tribal, that's a great word for it, right? It's tribal. And so if the head believes it, particularly the head of the family. So I have, I wouldn't consider her a friend. I went on my second trip to Israel. This woman was from Iraq area, but she's originally Assyrian. That was her heritage. So she carried Assyrian jewelry and stuff, so that that's who she identified with. Like that's where her tribal nation. And so she told me this, Nate, I never knew myself as not a Christian. I've always been a Christian. And as a Westerner, my Western thought says, I become a Christian when I individually decide to follow Jesus. As an Easterner, that's not the case. You are born into a family, and that's where you see in Scripture that if the head of the household decided to be baptized and the whole family followed suit, okay, that's an Eastern way of thinking, okay? So in this individual mindset, even our spirituality has been defined by that. How's your personal relationship with the Lord? How's your personal, that's a question we ask a lot, right? How's your personal relationship with the Lord? Well, that's important. I'm not going to devalue that, but how's your communal relationship with the Lord, right? I think my mother-in-law grew up Lutheran, is still Lutheran. My wife grew up Lutheran and is not. She goes to the Baptist church with me. But my mother-in-law's Lutheran church was more communal-based. So when I met her and started talking to her about this individual relationship with Jesus and knowing the scriptures on my own, she's like, what is that? Pastor always teaches us, right? Pastor does this. Pastor does this. And I might read a devotion, a one-page devotion each day that pastor gives me, but it's all based upon this communal thing. And I for the longest time, I was like, they've got it so wrong. And then I thought, no, actually, we've got a lot to learn from each other, right? There's some good things individually, but there's great things communally. But that individual mindset has infiltrated our spirituality. And so, yes, I think there's some value there, some individual responsibility of my role in my spiritual development, but also my role in your spiritual development. I think that's important. But we also have to understand the value of the tribe, the value of the community, which I think we've lost. And I was telling Dale earlier, my study when I did my doctorate was on sense of community and what it takes to develop that. And so there's certain elements that they studied and they did that. So, but we're losing that, and unless there's significant events that occur. What else? We've got maybe 5 minutes here, 10 minutes. Then we're going to eat some dinner. Anything else bother you? Or that you liked? Yes. Rebecca, right?
Yeah, I have something that bothers me. One thing that bothers me is somebody needs to, I know, whenever I first met my biological son,
Mm-hmm.
I was hearing about Donna Cloud, that's my third cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Been missing since 2016.
Okay.
She was supposed to go on a blind date.
Okay.
She met this guy on Facebook.
Right.
And she never came back.
Okay.
And they still looking for her to this day.
That's tough. So no news whatsoever.
And she left a party
Oh man.
son.
Right. Right.
And that's what bothers me is people are not telling the truth about where she is.
Hmm. So there's people.
Now, if she was killed or what.
Oh. Hmm. So you believe there's people that know, and that there's people hiding it.
Because one of them is afraid to take a life attack.
Hmm.
They're afraid to
Well, and part of that is what we're going to get into in next session of this idea of right and wrong and selfishness, right? And this concept of why are we dealing with these things? Why are we encountering all these things that are so I don't know, difficult to take in, whether that's individual, right? Like yours is personally impacting you every day, right? And then we have natural disasters that impact thousands of people at a time, or we have, I think about the most recent, because I studied it and read it, and I told you that Israel's important, this Palestinian-Israeli conflict that's been going on for 3,000 years, and we know where it originated, and we know why it's happening, but yet we still can't figure it out. But yet these are all the things that are wrong in the world today. And why? And I think you're frustrated with people, but I would imagine, I'm not going to speak for you here, but I would just imagine, because this would be my tendency, that I'm frustrated with God too about this. Because why hasn't it been resolved? Right? And he's all powerful, and I believe that. I believe that about him. And so why hasn't this been resolved? And so where we're going for the rest of the week is we're going to explore that question next. So we're still in the what, the why. We're going to get into what tomorrow. The why, we're in the problem, why we are facing the problems we are. And then we're going to start to get into the what, or the who God is, who Jesus is, who the Spirit is, and really what's the plan, right? Because if we don't know the plan, we don't know the end result, we don't know what he's doing, then we really can't defend his work, right? We really can't tell anybody else about it. And Pastor and I were talking about this last night, actually, and I think there's going to be some things that are surprising to you. Because in Western Christianity, we talked about this individual nature. I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser, because I got some time. Individual nature, I grew up thinking that the church and Jesus' dying on the cross, hear me correctly here, was only for my salvation, was only for the salvation of every individual, okay? That's what I grew up thinking and learning, that it was only for that. That's what I heard. Because if I accept Jesus, then I will go to heaven. I will go to heaven. I think it's much bigger than that. Okay? I think it's much bigger than that. It is much grander than my eternality and your eternality. Very important concept. It is very true. Not saying that did not happen and that was not part of the equation. It is. It very much so is. But it's so much bigger than that, and I think that gives us more to be excited about. And especially in our society where we don't live in, where our political society is this republic, right? This democratic republic. We don't have an idea of a king and a kingdom. We don't understand that. I think we're going to be really surprised what the kingdom actually looks like. So, anyways, let's stop before I give away too much, because